Hi everyone, this is a short video that is going to go over the specifics of your final project. I just want to go over each piece of it and then give you some tips and recommendations for how to complete it. There are two parts to your final project. So the first part is having a complete sales process. So we've studied the complete sales process throughout the course, and several of your written exercises have been pieces of the sales process. There are, though, however, a couple more things that you need to do to complete the entire sales process and then turn in your project. So I'm going to go over the different pieces and the additional new steps that you need to complete to have that complete kind of sales presentation to turn in. And then the second part of your final project is a paper, and we will go over the specifics of that, but the paper incorporates all of the things that you did for your sales project, and then you also answer a few more questions and give some explanations of what your sales project was like, what you learned from it, and we will go over each of those individual pieces too. But again, I think it's a little bit confusing because you're going to do an entire your sales plan and presentation in your project, and then your paper will also be in there talking about it, talking about the different things that you did. Before we get into the paper, I want to talk about all of the pieces that you will put together so you can show the kind of the entire sales process that you went through with your client as your every child as your client. And so I want to talk about what you have already done and then what you need to do so you have that complete kind of sales presentation and process ready to go. So I'll go over each of these in detail, but you're going to have your prospecting assignment, which you've already done. You'll have your sales dialogue questions, which you've already done. Then you will put together your sales dialogue presentation, which I'm going to go over how to do that. You'll have your objection list, which you've already done, and then you'll have additional pieces of how you recommend gaining commitment, and then your post-sales follow-up strategy to ensure that your customer is happy. The first part of your sales process and your complete kind of sales process and presentation that you are going to finish is the strategic prospecting assignment, and you are just going to include what you have already done. Now, if I have suggestions for you or things that I thought you needed to do differently, please make those suggestions and make those changes and then turn in. That'll be your first part of this sales process. So if you have no changes or recommendations, then you already have that first step complete and ready to go. The second step is your sales dialogue questions. So just put in the list of the questions that you asked during your phone call with your prospect. And then if you can just write a short paragraph about any insight that you gleaned from your prospect, what kind of needs you discovered, anything relevant that would help us see what you learned and why you are going to be suggesting which advertising package. So again, most of this you've already done, and then you're just going to add on a quick paragraph of the insight that you gleaned. If you do have questions that you wish you would have asked, go ahead and add those on too, because this is a learning experience, and so you can say, I wish I would have asked these questions too to get more insight. Next, we're going to get into the sales, like written proposal. And this is kind of some of the newest stuff that we haven't really done anything with. So you'll be creating all of this. So it's going to consist of the executive summary, the buyer situation, your recommendation, and the seller profile. So starting off with the executive summary, this will be the first part of the written proposal. And in this, you want to briefly address the customer problem. So you want to talk about what you kind of discovered in your sales call and briefly talk about that. And then you want to give an overview of the solution. You want to make it seem really valuable. So you want to briefly just mention in a couple of sentences or so, okay, here is the solution that I'm recommending. And instead of just talking about the solution, show why it's gonna answer the customer's problem. And again, you don't have to go into super great detail on this part. It's just kind of getting people, catching their attention, seeing that something valuable is going to be offered to them, so they are enticed to read more. As you know, in executive summaries, this is, you're thinking of a really busy executive who you're kind of giving the overview of in an exciting way. So you're giving the overview of your plan, so the executives are wanting to read more of your plan and continue. So you also want to do that. A lot of times people write the executive summaries at the end too, after they know all the information and everything that's going on in their plan. So feel free to do that, but remember that the executive summary goes first for the proposal. The next section is the buyer situation. And in this section, you want to list any relevant information from your phone call about the buyer situation. So maybe they're looking for more leads and they need marketing that's really going to give them greater awareness and more leads, or really anything that was their situation or problem. If they listed any goals that they have, really anything relevant about their situation, so you can describe it and really show them that you understand what it's like to be in their shoes, and really that you understand them and you understand their problem that they're currently facing. The next section is the actual recommendation. So with this, you want to remember the entire time that you are creating value. You are not just recommending specific parts of your proposal or your plan. You are recommending something that is going to be so valuable for the buyer that it's going to help them with their situation and it's going to solve their problems. So you want to come into writing the recommendation with this mindset. So based off of the information that you gathered and their problem, you are going to recommend an actual sponsorship program. So you can take the actual information from the sponsorship guide and just copy and paste the one that you recommend. But then I want you to explain why you recommend it and how it's going to speak to the buyer's needs. So you can use testimonials, look at the cheat sheet under week 8 resources. So there's testimonials that you can copy and paste a couple of those in. Look at the sponsorship information of why sponsorship really helps small businesses. Pick out statistics from that information. Use third-party statistics. Anything that's really going to sell them and show them how valuable it is. I encourage you to bring in your own photos and graphs, any charts that you want to make that you think would be valuable to look at. And then again, make sure to look at the resources that I've provided and pick and choose. And you're always welcome to add anything additional that you find in your research online. Then finally, you are going to end this part with the seller profile. So this is just really relevant information about the company and event that you represent. So in this case, you can just briefly talk about every child and who they are, and then briefly talk about the event and maybe how many people come, why it's such an important event to the community. This section can be relatively short. I just want you to get in the process of writing a seller profile, but it doesn't have to be super long. And that goes really for this whole sales written proposal, kind of this section of your plan. I understand that it's not going to be really long because there's not a ton of information. It's not going to be like 50 pages. So just make sure that you're providing all of the relevant pieces and really giving good overviews and everything that you have and can provide to show how valuable your solution is. The next piece is your objection list, and this is something that you completed in week 5. So if I didn't have any suggestions or changes for you, then you can go ahead and just insert your objection list into this sales process. And if I did have changes or feedback, then please make those changes and then insert that in. And just as a reminder, the objection list was going through and making a list of potential objections that you thought your prospect might have, and then going through and kind of explaining what you would say to counter those objections and overcome those objections. The next piece is gaining commitment, and this is a new piece that you're going to create. This doesn't have to be super long, but I want you to go back through the chapters that talk about how to gain commitment, how to make sure that your prospect is going to be excited about the opportunity and is going to want to go ahead and purchase what it is you're selling. So I would like for you to write at least a few paragraphs just talking about your ideas and strategies on how to get the prospect to be excited and how to get them to ultimately want to say yes. Then the final piece of your sales process, your whole sales presentation part of this assignment is your post-purchase follow-up. And this doesn't have to be a long piece of your assignment, but I want you to just brainstorm and pretend that your client or your prospect said, yes, they are going to purchase this and that they've purchased it. So I want you to think about how some different strategies of how you might follow up with them and engage, whether it's through emails. You could give a couple of email examples that you would send them, or if there's any training that they need, or if you were going to email them on their birthday, or just email them after the advertising had taken place. Just anything that you think would be good to ensure that they are really, really happy with their purchase, that they have everything they need, and that you can kind of turn them into a loyal customer. So there's no right or wrong answer for this. I just want you to be creative, and I want you to think about putting yourself in their shoes and seeing what kind of things they would like to receive from you to make them really happy with their purchase and to make them feel taken care of. So now we're going to talk about putting all of your paper together, inserting in your presentation that you've completed into your paper. And I know it's a tiny bit confusing. So you are going to submit to me your final paper that includes 5 different sections. And one of those sections is the execution, which is what we just talked about, all the different pieces of the sales process that you are going to insert in. And then we're going to go over the other 4 parts of the paper so you can see kind of what I'm looking for and the flow and the order of everything. First part of your paper is the introduction. And this introduction is an introduction to who your client is. I want to briefly know what their mission is, what their values are, where they operate, and pretend that you are telling someone who's never heard about this client. So you want to just simply explain in 1 or 2 paragraphs kind of what they stand for and who they are. And you can also just briefly introduce what it is that you are selling on behalf of your client. So briefly describe the advertising packages and the different events and programs that you are selling for them. Section 2 is just a sales process overview. I don't want this to be like what you learn during each of the steps. I just want you to pretend that you are telling someone who knows nothing about sales the kind of steps that you went through just briefly, and so they understand. Okay, so you started to talk about your prospecting, how you looked for the right people, and then setting up questions. So just in very basic terms, kind of going over what you did through the entire process. Again, not what you learned, just briefly the process that you went through. The third part of the paper is all of your execution pieces, which we talked about at the beginning of the video. So it's just putting in all of those pieces, and they are ready to go. So including your prospecting, your strategic prospecting assignment, your sales dialogue questions and what you learned, your sales dialogue, either like a written proposal or presentation, your objection list and how you would overcome those objections, how you would gain commitment, and then any post-sale follow-up strategy. So it's just putting all those pieces in as the third part of your paper. The fourth part of your paper are including 5 sales concepts, and including their definition kind of in just simple terms, what they are that you learned in the class, and then how you found those valuable and how you use those concepts during your sales process. So you could, for example, you could say, I discovered situational needs, which situational needs are when a customer has a situation and they're just really looking for a way to fix that situation. And I was able to discover that my prospect had the situational need of just really needing some more customers quickly. And through that, I was able to really work with her and express exactly that we can fill her situational needs. So, just along those lines of just using a concept from the class, from either the textbook or from the lecture, and then describing briefly again what it means, and then how you use that during the sales process, or how you found that it was valuable. Maybe you discovered that really communicating value was going to be valuable for this sales process. So you can explain something like that as well. But I want to see 5 different concepts that you learned and then that you definitely ran into when you were actually doing the sales process for yourself. So hopefully that makes sense. The final part of the paper is the conclusion, and this is you kind of wrapping up what you've learned. And then I also want you to include any overall relevant insight that you learned during this process, and anything that you would recommend for other similar companies that you learned that you think would be good for them to keep in mind. So, since you were working on behalf of a nonprofit client, you will want to keep in mind anything relevant that you think would be really good for other nonprofits who are going to be selling anything of any sort, and say this is good information for them to think about in the future. And if you have any more future recommendations for the client who you were selling for, you would want to just say, in the future, I would recommend that they also think about this, or they do a wider net of prospects, or that they learn how to communicate value a little better. Any of those things that you've read about in the book that you think would be good for the client to keep in mind. So this is the end of the explanation for your final paper. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. Have a great week.